All right. We are in the light of the soul, the Yoga Sutras, and we are in book 1, and we're going to start with number 8 and see if we can't get to 14. All right. Incorrect knowledge is based upon perception of the form and not upon the state of being. This sutra is somewhat difficult to paraphrase. Its significance consists in this: knowledge, deduction, and a decision which is based upon externals and upon the form through which any life in any kingdom of nature is expressing itself is, to the occultist, false and untrue knowledge. This is very deep. I hope we're able to make this to integrate this teaching right. This is very deep right here. Knowledge, deduction, and a decision which is based upon externals and upon the form through which any life in any kingdom of nature is expressing itself is false and untrue knowledge. At this stage in the evolutionary process, no form of any kind measures up to or is an inadequate expression of the indwelling life. No true adept judges any expression of divinity through its third aspect. Raja Yoga trains a man to function in his second aspect, and through that second aspect to put himself in rapport with the true nature latent in any form. It is the being that is the essential reality, and all beings are struggling toward true expression. All knowledge, therefore, which is acquired through the medium of the lower faculties and which is based upon the form aspect, is incorrect knowledge. So what more do we need to hear about? What more needs to be said about that? The soul alone perceives correctly. The soul alone has the power to contact the germ or the principle of Buddhi, in the Christian phraseology, the Christ principle, to be found at the heart of every atom. Whether it is the atom of matter as studied in the laboratory of the scientist, whether it is in the human atom in the crucible of daily experience, whether it is the planetary atom within whose ring pass not all our kingdoms of nature are found, or the solar atom, God in manifestation through the medium of a solar system. Christ knew what was in man and therefore could be a savior. Fancy rests upon images which have no real existence. So this word fancy is interesting. I was considering looking it up. Well, let's just see what is said about the word fancy, just to make sure we're, who knows, it might be representative of where this is going here. Okay, great. So this may help a little bit. A drawing, painting, or sculpture created from the imagination rather than form life. Okay, great. This means that these images have no real existence insofar as they are conjured up by men themselves, constructed within their own mental auras, energized by their will or desire, and are consequently dissipated when attention is directed elsewhere. energy follows thought is a basic tenet of the Raja Yoga system and is true even where these images of fancy are concerned. These fancied images fall primarily into three groups, which the student would do well to consider. One, those thought forms which he constructs himself, which have an evanescent life and which are dependent upon the quality of his desires. Being therefore neither good nor evil, low nor high, can be vitalized by low tendencies or idealistic aspirations, with all the intermediate stages to be found between these extremes. The aspirant has to guard himself in order that he may not mistake these for reality. An illustration might well be given here. In respect to the facility with which people judge they have seen one of the brothers, or masters of the wisdom, whereas all they have perceived is a thought form of one of them, the wish being father to the thought, they are the victim of that form of incorrect perception called by Patanjali fancy. Those thought forms, which are created by the race, the nation, the group, or the organization, group thought forms of any kind, from the planetary form that constructed by any band of thinkers, from the planetary form to that constructed by any band of thinkers, form the sum total of the great illusion. Herein lies a hint to the earnest aspirant. That thought form created by a man since his first appearance in physical form and called the dweller on the threshold, being created by the lower personal self and not by the soul. It is impermanent and is simply held together by the man's lower energy. When the man begins to function as the soul, this image he has created through his fancy or his reaction to delusion is dissipated by a supreme exertion. It has no real existence once there is nothing in the aspirant to feed it, and the realization of this enables him to free himself from its thraldom. This is one of the sutras which, though apparently short and simple, is of the most profound significance. It is studied by high initiates who are learning the nature of the creative process of the planet and who are concerned with the dissipation of planetary Maya. I would say this is extremely profound. No kidding. I mean, what else? I mean, this is great. This is the kind of stuff that, we feed on here, right? Passivity or sleep is based upon the quiescent state of the vrittis, or upon the non-perception of the senses. I looked up that word vrittis earlier, actually, to figure out how to say it. And it's something to that effect, vrittis. Some explanation as to the nature of the vrittis is perhaps necessary here. The vrittis are those activities of the mind which eventuate in the conscious relation between the self-employed and that which is sensed. And when I looked it up, it said they are the ripples in the mind. A apart from a certain modification of the mental process or an assertion of the I am, I realization, the senses might be active, yet the man be unaware of them. The man is aware that he sees, tastes, or hears. He says, I see, I taste, I hear, and it is the activity of the vrittis, or those mental perceptions which have relation to the five senses, which enable him to recognize the fact. By withdrawing himself from active sense perception, by no longer utilizing the outward going consciousness, and by abstracting that consciousness from the periphery to the center, it can bring on a condition of passivity, a lack of awareness, which is not the samadhi of the yogi, nor the achievement of one-pointedness, such as the student of yoga aspires to, but which is a form of trance. The self-imposed quieting is not only a detriment to the achievement of the highest yoga, but is excessively dangerous in many cases. And I've actually heard stories about I heard a story about Ramana Maharshi telling his disciples to wake a guy up out of this state and make him go walk around the mountain because it's no good. Make him go walk around Arunachala, I guess, because it's not good. This is not something to be aspired to. Students will do well to remember that right activity of the mind and its correct use is the goal of yoga, and that the state called a blank mind in a condition of passive receptivity with the sense relation cut off or atrophied is not part of the process. The sleep here referred to is not the passing of the body into the state of slumber, but the putting to sleep of the vrittis. It is the negation of the contacts of the senses without the sixth sense, the mind, superseding their activity. In this condition of sleep, a man is open to hallucination, to delusion, to wrong impressions, and to obsession. Sleep is of several kinds, and only a short tabulation is possible in such a commentary as this is. Now, you're going to have to forgive me for this, but I am going to read these again. I'm going to read this again. I feel like we passed by it, or I passed by it. I did not pick up on what I was meant to, so I'm going to do it again. Passivity, sleep, is based upon the quiescent state of the non-perception of the senses. Some explanation to this is perhaps here necessary. They are those activities of the mind which eventuate in the conscious relation between the sense employed and that which is sensed. Apart from a certain modification of the mental process or an assertion of the I am I realization, the senses might be active, yet the man be unaware of them. The man is aware that he sees, tastes, or hears. He says, I see, I taste, I hear. And it is the activity of the non-perception of the senses the vrittis, or those mental perceptions which have relation to the five senses, which enable him to recognize the fact. By withdrawing himself from the active sense perception, by no longer utilizing the outward going consciousness, and by abstracting that consciousness from the periphery to the center, you can bring on a condition of passivity, a lack of awareness, which is not the samadhi of the yogi, nor the achievement of one-pointedness, such as the student of yoga aspires to, but which is a form of trance. This self-imposed quieting is not only a detriment to the achievement of the highest yoga, but is excessively dangerous in many cases. Students will do well to remember that right activity of the mind and its correct use is the goal of yoga, and that the state called a blank mind and a condition of passive receptivity with the sense relations cut off or atrophied is not part of the process. The sleep here referred to is not the passing of the body into a state of slumber, but putting to sleep of the vrittis. It is the negation of the contacts of the senses without the sixth sense, the mind, superseding their activities. In this condition of sleep, a man is open to hallucination, delusion, wrong impressions, and to obsessions. So, all right, sleep is of several kinds, and only a short tabulation is possible in such a commentary as this. The ordinary sleep of the physical body, where the brain does not respond to any sense contacts. Sleep of the vrittis, or of those modifications of the mental processes which correlate the man with his environment through the medium of the senses and the mind. 3, the sleep of the soul, which, occultly speaking, covers that part of human experience which dates from a man's first human incarnation until he awakens to a knowledge of the plan and endeavors to bring the lower man into line with the nature and will of the inner spiritual man. And 4, all right, not and 4, the sleep of the ordinary medium, wherein the etheric body is partially extruded from the physical body and is likewise separated from the astral body, bringing in a condition of very real danger. Samadhi, or the sleep of the yogi, the result of the conscious scientific withdrawal of the real man from his lower threefold sheath in order to work on high levels preparatory to some active service upon the lower. 6 is the sleep of the Nirmanakaya, which is a condition of such intense spiritual concentration and focusing in the spiritual or atmic body that the outward going consciousness is withdrawn not only from the 3 planes of human endeavor, but likewise from the 2 lower expressions of the spiritual triad. For purposes of his peculiar and specific work, the Nirmanakaya sleeps, quote unquote, sleeps to all states save that of the 3rd or the atmic plane. That is a stout rule. 11, memory is the holding on to that which has been known. This ought to be good. This memory concerns several groups of realizations, either active or latent. It deals with certain congeries of known factors, and these might be enumerated as follows. 1, the thought images of that which is tangible, objective, and which has been known by the thinker upon the physical plane. 2, monastic images of past desires and their gratification. The picture-making faculty of the average man is based upon his desires, high or low desires, aspirational or degrading, and its sense of pulling down, and their known gratification. This remains equally true of the memory of the gluttonous man, for instance, and his latent image of a satisfactory dinner, and the memory of the Orthodox saint based upon his picture of making of a joyous heaven. That memory activity, which is the result of mental training, the accumulation of acquired facts, the consequence of reading or of teaching, and which is not purely based upon desire, but which has its basis in intellectual interest. All the various contacts which the memory holds and recognizes as emanating from the 5 lower sense perceptions, those mental images latent in the memory-making faculty, which are the total of the knowledge contacted and the realizations evoked by the right use of the mind as a 6th sense. All these forms of the memory faculty have to be dropped and no longer held. They must be recognized as modifications of the mind, of the thinking principle, and therefore as part of that versatile psychic nature which has to be dominated before the yogi can hope to attain liberation from limitation and from all lower activity. And this is the goal. Finally, for it is not necessary to enumerate more intricate subdivisions. Memory includes also the accumulated experiences gained by the soul through the many incarnations and stored up in the true consciousness of the soul. The control of these modifications of the internal, I'm sorry, we'll stop right there. So that was 11. That was this 11th sutra. That was the faculty of memory. And that is what we're looking at contained in it. And this is a lot. This is what's all contained in desire lower mind, result of mental training, and acquiring facts. Memory recognizes emanating from the 5 lower sense perceptions. These are all the memories that we might have. And, you can imagine, like, even the smells from that you recognize from your grandma's house that you might, that from a child or your childhood or something. It was interesting. I walked in my parents' house just last week, and I said, "Well, it smells like the church here." And the church haven't been in New Jersey, and I'm in North Carolina, and I hadn't been there for, I don't know, couldn't tell you. And I said, "It smells like the church in here. It smells like church." And so we just got this mail from it. I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." I said, "You don't smell that?" I don't smell it. The whole house smelled like it, if you ask me. But, so these are all things that will come up. The principle of thinking, all of this. It's incredible. Common sense, but nevertheless, we're talking about a lot of information. Information. The group information. All right, so the control, let's go to 12. The control of these modifications of the internal organ, the mind, is to be brought about through tireless endeavor and through non-attachment. A few brief explanations are all that is necessary with a sutra as easy to apprehend as this one. Intellectually, its meaning is clear. In practice, however, it is difficult to carry out. The control of these modifications of the internal organ, the mind, is to be brought about through tireless endeavor and through non-attachment. The internal organ is, of course, the mind. Occidental thinkers should remember that the Eastern occultist does not consider the organs to be the physical organs The reason for this is that the physical body in its dense or concrete form is not regarded as a principle, but simply as the tangible outcome of the activity of the real principles. The organs, occultly speaking, are such centers of activity as the mind, the various permanent atoms, and the centers of force in the various sheaths. These all have their objective shadows or results, and these resultant emanations are the external physical organs. The brain, for instance, is the shadow or the external organ of the mind, and it will be found by the investigator that the contents of the brain cavity have a correspondence to the aspects of the human mechanism found upon the mental plane. This latter sentence should be emphasized. It conveys a hint to those capable of taking advantage of it. This is some deep stuff right here. The brain is the shadow or the external organ of the mind. And it will be found by the investigator that the contents of the brain cavity have a correspondence to the aspect of the human mechanism found upon the mental plane. So we're trying to, I'm thinking, it looks like the tree branches and, the pathways of the nerves and such, and connecting all these, I don't even know what I don't have the right word for that, connecting everything in there. The latter sentence should be emphasized. That's something to ponder on for sure. I mean, all this is very deep. The organ, occultly speaking, are such centers of activity as the mind, the various permanent atoms, and the centers of force in the various sheaths. This is something we should probably all refer back to if we're not picking it up. I know I certainly will. I'm not grasping all of that as it should be grasped out the gate. To tireless endeavor means literally constant practice, ceaseless repetition, and the reiterated effort to impose the new rhythm upon the old, and to efface deep-seated habits and modifications by the institution of soul impression. The yogi or master is the result of patient endurance. His achievement is the fruit of a steady effort, which is based upon intelligent appreciation of the work to be done and the goal to be reached, and not upon spasmodic enthusiasm. Non-attachment is the one thing that eventually brings all sense perceptions to perform their legitimate functions. Through non-attachment to those forms of knowledge with which the senses put a man in contact, they continuously lose their hold over him. The time eventually comes when he is liberated and is the master of his senses and of all sense contacts. This does not involve a state wherein they are atrophied and useless, but is one in which they are useful to the yogi when and as he chooses, and insofar as he chooses. They are utilized by him in increasing his efficiency in group service and in group endeavor. So it's intelligent use of these here, right? We're not disregarding them. All of this, including the emotions and the body and all of these things, are used intelligently. On to 13. Well, let's just go back here real quick. All right, that's deep stuff. All right. Tireless endeavor is the constant effort to restrain the modifications of the mind. This is one of the most difficult sutras to translate so as to give its real significance. The idea involves that of the constant effort made by the spiritual man to restrain the modifications or the fluctuations of the mind and to control the lower psychic versatile nature in order to fully express his own spiritual nature. Thus, and only thus, can the spiritual man live the life of the soul each day upon the physical plane. Charles Johnston, in his translation, seeks to give this meaning in the words, the right use of the will is the steady effort to stand in spiritual being. The idea involved is that of applying to the mind, regarded as a sixth sense, the same restraint that the 5 lower senses are subjugated to. Their outward going activities are stopped and they are held from responding to the pull or attraction of their particular field of knowledge. Well, that was pretty easy, pretty simple one there, huh? Now that Charles Johnson's quote there is pretty good. The right use of the will is the steady effort to stand in spiritual being. And that's not necessarily easy, right? Sometimes. All right, 14, when the object to be gained is sufficiently valued and the efforts towards its attainment are persistently followed without intermission, then the steadiness of the mind is secured. And that's steadiness of the mind, restraint of the vrittis is secured. All followers of Raja Yoga must first be devotees. Only intense love of the soul and of all that knowledge of the soul entails, all that knowledge, only intense love of the soul and of all that knowledge of the soul entails will carry the aspirant with sufficient steadiness towards his goal. The objective in view, union with the soul and consequently with the oversoul and with all souls, must be justly appraised, the reason for its achievement correctly judged, and the results to be gained most earnestly desired or loved before the aspirant will make that sufficiently strong effort which will give him his hold upon the modifications of the mind and consequently upon his entire lower nature. When this appreciation is true enough and his ability to go forward with the work of subjugation and control is without intermission, then the time will come when the student will know consciously and increasingly what is the meaning of restraint of the modifications. Lots of really good stuff in there today. Certainly stuff to go back on. Number 12 really sticks out. And I think even 11 was something else that stuck out pretty good there too. Something to ponder on. I mean, there's just so much deep stuff. You should, we could really do one at a time. and just, meditate on them honestly. But again, we're absorbing and trying to learn as we go here, and synthesize this material with that of the Bhagavad Gita and the New Testament, and bring in this understanding of the experience of the soul into the ageless wisdom with us, into these esoteric books and a treatise on the seven rays, and all that knowledge in the 24 esoteric books. And it certainly has its place, and we can see that already. And in some of these places, very deep. Okay, we'll call it there, and we'll get back at it again tomorrow. Have a good one.